And I think those of us who've been placed in this intellectual dark web group, there's some things we have in common. We more or less have independent voices because we're not beholden to any corporate masters except peripherally. And we've been operating in this long form space, and the technology has facilitated that. And so all of a sudden it turns out that there's more to people than we thought. And thank God for that. I'm
struggling with, I don't want to use the word hate. There seems to be a non-acceptance or a resistance to the idea that anything of quality could come out of this group of people. It's really interesting to me, and I'm wondering why. When I listen to you speak, or Sam, or Eric, or any of these people, Ben or Dave, and I hear very interesting points, and I'm like, why are people resisting that these are interesting points? Why are they resisting this? And I think there's a lot of people that are beholden to mainstream organizations, whether it's newspapers or magazines or television shows, that feel trapped. I think they feel trapped by this format that they're stuck in. It's a very limiting format, and it's a format that, in my opinion, is like, it might as well be smoke signals or ham radio or something. It's dumb. This idea that you're going to go to commercials every 15 minutes and in between you have 15 people arguing. I watched a panel on CNN once, and I think we counted 10 people that were trying to talk during this 5-minute segment. I'm like, what genius thought that it would be a good idea to get 10 people struggling for airtime, barking over each other, no one saying anything that makes any sense because everybody's talking over and trying to stand out and trying to say the most outrageous things. And I'm seeing like some of the resistance to this when we span, pretty far, from Sam and I lean more left, and Ben leans more right, and you're what you would call a classic liberal, and Eric's very difficult to define, and Brett is fiercely progressive. Brett in particular is a very left-wing guy, but this desire to label and to have this diminishing label is like alt-right or, right-wing or fascist. It's very strange to me.
Yeah, well, there's a couple of things going on. I think one of them is that the technological transformation that I laid out, and then the other is that I do believe that, especially for the radical leftist types, the whole notion of free speech among individuals is not only anathema, but also something that isn't possible within their framework of reference. I've been trying to think this through very carefully because, free speech in some sense has become identified as a right-wing issue. And I thought, well, how the hell did that happen? And then I thought, oh, yes, well, if you're radically left and you're playing the identity politics game, there's actually no such thing as free speech because you're only the mouthpiece of your group, whether you know it or not. So you don't get to talk as Joe Rogan. You get to talk as like Joe Rogan, patriarchal white guy. And that's it. And your utterances aren't a reflection of your own opinions as an individual, but they're an attempt on your part, whether you know it or not, to justify your position in the power hierarchy. And so everything right now, and this is where the technology and the death of the mainstream media and this political polarization all unite, everything is turned into a political conversation in the mainstream media, and it has to be cast as left versus right. And if you're criticizing the left, then all of a sudden you're right and right wing, and it has to be about politics. It's like, well, it doesn't have to be about politics. It could be about philosophy. It doesn't have to be cast in political terms, and then it's also subject to a form of it's made more stupid than it has to be by these terrible bandwidth limitations. Like, I've been on mainstream TV talk shows, and it's a very strange experience because you're definitely content. Marshall McLuhan said the medium is the message, right? The medium shapes the dialogue, and it does in a tremendous way, powerful way. You go on a TV talk show, and maybe it's an hour long, something like that, and there's 5 guests, and you've got your 8 minutes, something like that. And you have to be bright and chipper and entertaining and intelligent and sort of glitzy. And it puts that facade of momentary charisma on you. And if you don't play that out, you actually fail, right? Because you can't start a long-form discussion when you've got 6 minutes. And if you're trying to talk about something that's deep and difficult, well, you want to talk about it because you've got the access then and the opportunity, but you've got your 6 minutes. You can't help but turn into sort of a glitzy entertainer. And so it cheapens everything. And then the other thing that I think is happening is that as the mainstream media, television in particular, dies, the quality people are starting to desert, like rats leaving a sinking ship. I guess they're good rats if they're quality people. But and then there's ever more enticement to use clickbait journalism to attract a diminishing portion of the remaining audience.
Yeah.
You know, it's like one of the things that's happened. So if you look at the 5 major indices of violent crime in the United States, they've declined by 50% in 25 years. It's absolutely beyond comprehension. It's so good. This includes violent gun crime, by the way. And yet the reports of violence in media have gone up and up and up and up. You think, well, what's going on? It's like, well, it's clickbait. It's the equivalent of clickbait. And then to turn everything into a polarized political discussion takes no real intellectual energy. But it's also driven by the death spiral of the classic media, I think. And I think that's actually why the polarization seems to be so acute now. Some of it is genuine, but some of it is the consequence of this underlying technological transformation and the death throes of the smoke signalers, fundamentally.
What you're talking about when you're saying people, especially radical leftists, have to concede certain points whenever they discuss things, this is so true and so important because you see that play out over and over again. There's very little variation from the official narrative when they talk about important subjects or controversial subjects, and whatever they are, whether it's transgender rights or whatever's in the news that's big and you know that it's very popular right now. There's these certain things that you're not allowed to deviate from, and that's an insanely restrictive perspective. And who's establishing these norms? Like who's
That's a good question, man.
Yeah, who is?
Well, I blame the universities in large part for this, the activist disciplines.
Yeah.
But that's only a partial answer because the universities are also responding to legislation like Title IX